Hi guys and dolls. I recently had my first experience with group meditation and I thought I would do a video just talking a little bit about that and talking about what the differences are between group meditation and solitary meditative practice. The first thing I'll say is I actually have been meditating for about 10 years now, almost 10 years. And the way I came to meditation was kind of not probably what you'd expect for a very, very long standing pagan, a self professed witch. It wasn't really a spiritual thing. It wasn't an avenue that I went down for spiritual clarity or spiritual progression. It was actually an anger management thing. I had rage really badly as a teenager. And when I first got into a serious relationship with a guy when I was like 17, 18, I realised that rage was kind of doing its work to make me very unhappy and make me uncommunicative and generally very difficult to be around. And it made me kind of wake up to a lot of the bad habits and the unproductive ways of being that I'd inherited from being around my father and kind of copying the way he was with people, I suppose you could say. And I I saw from one or two sources that people who generally had problems with anger management were encouraged to meditate or to practice mindfulness or to find some way of being still. And I also read an article, and I've read a few more articles as I've kind of gotten older, about men who were in prison for violent crimes actually taking up meditation while they were inside doing their time. And by the time they'd come out, they were like a completely different person, a reformed character, or what have you. So I took up meditation for anger management, and it took me a very long time to be able to sit still and to be able to practice mindfulness. It was something that I really put my heart and soul into. And as a teenager, I think it's probably strange and quite rare, I think, for teenagers in Western society to put quite so much emphasis on the importance of mindfulness and stillness. But I think I just had this deeply held belief that it would help me, it would save me in some way from myself or from those aspects of myself that were ruining my interpersonal relationships and rendering me completely unable to talk about what was wrong. So yeah, I put a lot of energy into meditation and rested a lot of importance on meditation, and eventually I got really, really fucking good at it. um and then I don't know, one thing happened and another thing happened, I guess. I was sitting meditation for a really long time and it was such a powerful tool for me. I got to the point where I was so practiced at the art of stillness and mindfulness that I could meditate at a train station. And I have done a few times, meditated at train stations. And I think I got to the stage where I always thought I'd have the ability to go straight into the meditative state. It just got easier and easier. It got more and more organic as time went on. And I always thought it would be with me. And then a year or so ago, it just left the building completely. It was a nightmare. I just couldn't really sit anymore. I mean, I'd been doing it less and less anyway because my life had been so hectic. A lot of changes had taken place. I had a boyfriend for a while who kind of, I suppose, wouldn't really have understood or appreciated meditation, I suppose you could say. And I don't want you to think I was hiding it from him or whatever, but I've spoken in a previous video about the difficulties that I had with him whenever I spoke about spirituality or anything like that. So I think I kind of curbed those exercises. Then he moved in and it became more and more difficult. I mean, we didn't share a room. He lived in another room in kind of like a 3-story shared house with other friends and stuff. So it wasn't too much of an invasion, but it did stop me from exploring that side of me, I suppose you could say. I kind of put things on hold. And then things became even more hectic, and I was single and on this crazy mad, like, psychedelic rampage for a really long time. Meditation again took a back seat. When I tried to go back to it at the beginning of this year, I completely had lost the ability to sit. Completely. And then my really loud, rowdy friend moved in and became my housemate next door. And the opportunities to actually attempt to sit were drastically reduced. Then my boyfriend moved in with me into my room, and again, drastically reduced opportunities to meditate. Just, it got to the stage where I was attempting to sit meditation in the bath because that was really the only time I had to myself. that I felt was quiet enough, because obviously I'd lost a lot of that ability to bring on stillness no matter what the circumstances or no matter what was going on in the outer world. I was no longer that person who could sit meditation in a train station. It wasn't going to happen. I needed that quiet and I wasn't getting it. So I came to the realization a few months ago that in the new year I was going to have to find a group meditation class, because I needed that time to be set aside for meditation, and I've realised that I really do need to sit meditation. I don't know if it's the same for any of you who sit regularly, but I need to sit meditation. It was driving me bananas that I couldn't sit. It was driving me bananas that I'd lost the ability to do it in whatever circumstances played out, but it was also driving me bananas that I didn't have the space and the time to attempt to kind of get that skill back, if you can call it a skill. So I went to this group meditation class last week and it was really, really awesome. I totally, I, there were a lot of parts of it that I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting to feel quite so zen when I left and quite so at one with myself. And immediately I just felt like, God, I haven't lost this. It's still in me. I just needed to allow myself that time to be set aside. So the first exercise we did when I showed up, and a lot of them had been going for a long time and a couple of them were really new to it. I wasn't the only person that was there for the first time though, so that was nice. The first exercise that we did was a body awareness exercise. I don't normally work with that kind of thing in meditation. I do sometimes do it if I get into a meditative state before I go to sleep. To try and help myself go off to sleep if I'm feeling overactive in my mind or my imagination. I'll do a body awareness exercise, where I'll pay attention to what's going on in my head, how do I feel in my face, my neck, my shoulders, and go down like that in an attempt to fall asleep. But I've never really tried it lately, certainly in the last few years, as a meditative exercise. So at first I was a little reluctant, but it was incredible. I went so much deeper than I realised I was going. And the way that I realised that I'd gotten so deep into the meditative state was that at the end of the 25 minute exercise, in which she kind of talked us through the body awareness aspect of it, she used a bell, like a singing bowl, and just lightly kind of tapped it to bring us back into the room. And that bell, because obviously I practice as a solitary, I practice meditation in a solitary context. I've never really used sound to bring myself out of the meditative state and back into my body. So this bell was like unbelievable. I mean, literally, I felt physical sensations from this bell. It really brought me back into the room and it really made me realise how deep on the journey into this body awareness I had gone. I was really in a state of true mindfulness, and I'll talk about mindfulness in other videos and how important it is to me, not really so much even for the spiritual journey, but just for overall sanity. So yeah, the bell was incredible, and the teacher did speak after that exercise actually about a retreat in India that she's visited, and there's a meditation master there. And whenever he's there teaching meditation, there's always work through the day, like work in the fields and then private meditation, group meditation, whatever. There's a structure, if you see what I mean. There's a timetable for the day. This meditation master makes a point of having what he calls the mindfulness teacher, which is basically a bell that goes off every hour or every 2 hours or something. And his point with the mindfulness teacher was that it's not actually hard to achieve true mindfulness. It's not hard to actually be in the present moment. What's hard is to remember what it's like to be in the present moment. So whenever we're not being mindful, it's difficult to actually get ourselves into that mindful state again. Once we are practicing mindfulness, once the moment is happening to us, it's very, very easy, it's natural, it comes organically. But when we've forgotten all about it and we're running around like busy bees, remembering mindfulness, actually having that moment, like for example with me, I have a pill that I need to take every night. My boyfriend has a form of medication that he needs to take every night. Or things that you need to do every day. I need to check certain email accounts every day. And there's that moment during the day where I go, oh yeah, I need to do that. Mindfulness is very hard to put into that context because it's about the moment, there's no fixation on the past or the future with mindfulness. So you very quickly forget to actually remember. So the mindfulness teacher is this bell that goes off, and it basically just reminds you to check in with yourself. Whenever you hear the bell, it's your time to be mindful. And I really loved that idea, and it was something that made me think, I need a little alarm to go off a few times a day to remind me to be mindful, that little remembrance that mindfulness is something that really does it for me. Mindfulness is something that brings me back into myself and helps me to follow my bliss, I suppose you could say. And it kind of clears out all the crap, you know. It makes me focus on nonsense a lot less, I suppose. And also, I was reading recently with regard to mindfulness, this guy who's written a book about mindfulness, his name escapes me now, was saying that practicing mindfulness should actually be part of your ethical code, because if you're not present and if you're not checking in with yourself, then you are much more likely to be under the influence of people that you don't really agree with, or you're much more likely to go along with something that you don't agree with or say something that you don't mean. Mindfulness actually allows you to constantly be with your core being. And that interested me as well, the idea that it's actually an ethical conundrum to not be mindful. That was something that was quite new to me. The next exercise we did with group meditation was walking practice, and that was really interesting. I've never tried that before either. Basically, she just asked us all to stand up, set our pillows and blankets aside, and just walk very, very slowly, very mindfully, very consciously around the room. And just pick out your pathway around the room and do that in silence for like 20 minutes. That was really interesting, kind of just feeling the way your leg is moving, concentrating on it because you're doing it so slowly, feeling the balls of your feet rest on the floor and then come up off the floor and your heel go into the air. And then, you know, I really felt like a little bit like a stealthy cat, but I also felt like it was an exercise that tapped me into the idea of weightlessness and of transcendence from the body. So even though it was an exercise that was very much tapped into physical awareness, the fact that I was moving so slowly and so gracefully, the fact that even for the first 5 minutes I was doing it, I was so unsteady on my feet that I was almost falling over, because I don't walk that slowly. I walk automatically, I walk without thinking. So to walk so consciously was actually a bloody big effort for the first 5 minutes, and I nearly went arse over tit, as we say in England. So that was a really interesting exercise as well, that I would never have done if I'd have just kind of stayed in solitary meditation practice. So I was pushing my own boundaries, which was fantastic. And she did talk a little bit when we first went into the first meditation. She talked a little bit about the meeting that you have with yourself when you go into the meditative state. And this is something that I think a lot of people that practice meditation will probably understand and relate to. But it was really interesting for me because I haven't actually been able to sit meditation properly for a really, really long time. So it was kind of, when she said it, it was a bit of an aha moment for me. It was a eureka moment, because it is something that I feel really strongly, but I've forgotten that memory because it's been so long since I've really sat meditation truly. She said that sometimes when you meet yourself and when you go into the meditative state, it is like a meeting with yourself. That's why in so many meditative disciplines they tell you to close your eyes. It's not because they are trying to encourage you to completely reject the physical realm. It's because it's a symbolic way of saying, now I'm going inward, now I'm going inside. The work that I'm doing is inward work, not outward work, kind of thing. And I like that idea. You know, I do practice open eye meditation too. I favour both kinds, depends how I'm feeling. But yeah, she said that, you know, when you go into yourself, into the meditative state, you meet yourself. And sometimes those meetings are easy and comfortable. Sometimes they feel very organic. Sometimes it flows. Sometimes you've just got it down and you go with it and you begin on your walk. Other times when you meet yourself inside, the meeting is uneasy, and sometimes you may wish to question why it's uneasy, or sometimes, you know, you're not expecting it to be uneasy, but it feels very raw. It feels maybe a little bit fractured. And that spoke to me so much, because that's so true. You know, some of the meetings I've had with myself when I've gone into the meditative state have been fractured or difficult or kind of a little bit unnerving. I've had to really wait for the waves to settle so that I could work out how comfortable I was to continue with the meditation, particularly when it's a meditation that's going to last for like an hour. Those uneasy meetings are interesting, and they give us a chance to further our exploration of ourselves and our meditative practice and our meditative ability. After the group meditation, I did something else that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was just practicing solitary meditation, and that is talk to the other people who were there, which was fascinating. I spoke to women who, you know, I mean, there were guys there as well, which was interesting. One guy had been going for like years and years and years and was so practiced. And another guy, it was literally his first time there. And he just had felt this desire from nowhere to meditate, which was really interesting. I met a woman there who had only been meditating for a year, which really surprised me, because when I first walked into the room and sat down and kind of got ready and prepared to meditate, she really seemed like she was the one that was totally into it. You know, you get that energy from somebody that they've really been doing something for a very long time. They know everybody in the room. They're kind of schmoozing with their green tea before the meditative exercises begin. And she had like a really nice meditation pillow. And I just got this vibe from her that she'd been practicing for years. But no, she'd only just been practicing for 1 year. She said that she also came to it with absolutely no spiritual agenda in mind whatsoever. In fact, she was very anti the idea that it would lead to anything spiritually fulfilling for her. She actually did it because it was recommended to her as a way that perhaps she could help herself with her chronic fatigue syndrome, which she was diagnosed with just over a year ago. So apparently, when she went to her first meditation class, she actually had a disclaimer. She went in and she said, I don't want any spiritual BS, okay? I'm just here to meditate. I'm just here for the meditation. So she was very defensive and very kind of maybe at first felt unable to allow herself to really fall into meditation as a skill. And now she's absolutely into it, just loves it. She says it cured her of chronic fatigue syndrome. She was able to go back to work. She said she wasn't expecting that kind of thing at all, and now she's going to practice meditation every day, sit meditation every day for the rest of her life. And she'd just come back from a silence retreat, which I found really interesting because she, like me, was exceptionally verbose, you know, very, very wordy, a big talker. So it fascinated me that she'd come back from an 8-day silence retreat, and she told me that unlike any other aspect of her life where she would be very talkative and very communicative, the silence retreat actually made her so silent and so inward that when it came time for her to actually go to the teacher to speak if she wanted to about the work, about how she felt, she actually remained silent, whereas she knows that a great many others did actually decide to talk to the teacher. She actually just sat there in silence. And she said even when she came home to be with her family, she didn't want to speak. She was very quiet for the first few days. And of course, also, she felt a little bit linguistically trapped because she hadn't spoken for 8 days. So she felt like if she did speak, then only gobbledygook would come out, which was another really interesting thing for me to learn. I've thought on and off about doing a silence retreat for a really long time. I think because I feel like it would be ultimately so challenging to me. You know, I don't think it's because I'm afraid of silence, and I think there are a lot of doctrines and a lot of ideas in kind of Western New Age holistic therapies and such that people are actually afraid of silence, that they talk to fill the silence, or that silence kind of turns them in towards their shadow aspect or makes them think about things that they're not quite ready to accept. I don't think that's the reason that I don't really favour silence as much as I should do. I don't think it's because I'm afraid, because I actively throw myself into shadow work and such like. I think it's because I love language and I am eloquent, I believe, anyway. So when I have something to express, I'm not afraid to express it. I love expressing it. I get the joy of using language, the joy of utilising my vocabulary. I love it. It just feels good. And I encourage other people to do the same. I love for my friends to talk to me. I love the engagement. I love the debate. I love that kind of thing. So I think it's more about just embracing what I love and throwing my arms around what I really love, which is language and linguistics and words, you know, as you can see. So I think that's more why I feel a silence retreat would be a challenge for me, and it's always really interested me to know that a lot of people do have somewhat of a meltdown when they go to their first silence retreat. They have this moment, one woman that was there was saying that it's normally on the third day. If it's a week, it'll be on the third day, where even the most hardened of people who really kind of go into it thinking, oh yeah, silence retreat, no problem, that's going to be easy, they have some kind of a meltdown because silence and the practicing of stillness and mindfulness and the meditative state really does something to you. It breaks something down. It does something with the ego. It's almost like a form of ego death, but also a meeting with everything that's behind in your core being as well. So yeah, you know, it is something that I've thought about on and off, and getting to speak with women who've actually done it, because there were a few women there who've done silence retreats, was very exciting to me, and it made me think more about doing it. And I spoke to my mum about it actually a few days ago. I mentioned that I'd spoken to some women who'd done silence retreat, and she said, you know, look into that because I'd be interested in doing that as well. So it might end up being something that I do with my mum, which would be awesome. Also, at the end of the group meditation class, I had a chance to, while I was speaking with these women, I had a chance to kind of talk about the differences between solitary meditative practice and group practice, because there definitely is a different vibe, there definitely is a different energy, and a couple of the women there were talking about that different energy and where it comes from and why it's different to sit meditation with a bunch of people than it is to do it alone. And it was quite strange, really, because I was the only person that came forward with the idea that meditation is a form of either energy raising or energy transformation of some kind. You know, the vibrations are in flux, and then when you go into the meditative state, they level out somewhere else than they were before. You're changing your vibrational frequency, if you like. You're changing the vibe, you're changing the mood around you and within you. And I was the only person that kind of mentioned that I think the reason why group meditative practice feels so different is because it's actually a form of energy raising. It's a bunch of people getting together under an umbrella of intention. So it's exactly like inside the pagan circle, where you'll dance to raise energy. You know, you will go forward with a group intention and you will all work to try and manifest it. You'll all envision the same thing, or you'll all speak the same words. And the idea of combined energy comes together to form a very powerful and precious way of manifesting intention, or of manifesting feeling, if you will. And it was funny because when I mentioned it, this woman, the woman who'd been on a silence retreat and stuff like that, she was kind of really, she took that as a bit of a revelation. She was like, God, yeah, I've never really thought about it like that. Of course, it's kind of it's a group energy thing. But obviously, because of my knowledge and experience with paganism and witchcraft, that's the thing that first came into my mind. You know, the idea that group meditation is different from solitary meditation, because you are all, in a way, counting on and leaning on and feeling and becoming enmeshed in each other's energy, and to an extent, because you're all doing the same thing at the same time, it's with the same purpose that you're doing it, and therefore there's this energy that's actually swirling around and becoming part of the room and part of the energy field, I guess you could say. So these were just some experiences that I had with my first group meditation practice, and I will be doing more. I will definitely be going to classes, fortnightly classes, to sit meditation, and there will be a few different teachers, but the teacher that I met last time actually also does mindfulness classes, where she uses lots of other techniques, different techniques that you wouldn't necessarily find in the meditative setting, but techniques to help you with mindfulness at work and mindfulness with other aspects of your life. So I'm definitely going to do that as well, and I will let you know how that goes. And that's really about all I wanted to say for the moment on group meditation practice. And if you haven't tried it and you do practice solitary meditation, I would definitely suggest, if you can, and if it's the kind of thing that speaks to you, mixing it up and going for a group lesson, because it really was an eye-opening experience. Blessed be everyone. Bye for now.